in particular, three very important people. To begin with, our partner and President of Indian Chamber, Mr. Pradeep Sarekha, as also Mr. Rajiv Singh, who is the Director General. And what should I say? I'd like to thank them very much for partnering with us on this session. And we also have two sort of very dear friends of both ICC as also me personally, Sumit Majumdar and Sanjay Budia. So welcome to both of you. And as I just mentioned before, a few minutes earlier, Mr. Nick Lowe, who's the Deputy High Commissioner for the UK in Kolkata, he unfortunately has been hospitalized, but I did sort of have a few WhatsApp chats with him about a couple of hours ago, and he says, please do convey my apologies, but there's no way I can join since I'm admitted in hospital. So I'm sure all of us joins in wishing him sort of a speedy recovery back to good health. So without further ado, welcome to one and all. And I think Pradeep, you're the host in a way. So can I hand over to the host, Pradeep?
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you. On behalf of Indian Chamber of Commerce, I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present here with us today. Unfortunately, as we heard earlier from Mr. Kaul, that Mr. Lowe is in hospital, and we wish him speedy recovery. And we shall greatly miss his presence in today's function. I welcome Mr. Sumit Majumdar, Chairman and Managing Director, TIL. I extend my warm welcome to Sanjay Budia, Managing Director, Pattern Group, and of course, past President of Indian Chamber of Commerce. I also welcome Mr. Rajiv Kaul, President of IBSA and Chairman, Nico Engineering Limited, and a senior member and a past President of ICC. I wish to make a few brief points about existing status of the Indian economy and its potential. The Indian economy is on a higher inclusive growth trajectory, moving towards a developed and a better governed India. Based on recent GDP figures, an Indian economy remained on track to post the fastest growth among major economies this year. GDP expanded by a better than expected 8.4% in the July-September quarter to cross the pre-pandemic levels. Various high-frequency indicators, including GST revenue, e-way bills, power consumption, vehicle registrations, railway freight, corporate profitability, FDI inflows, steel consumptions, instill confidence that the real rate of growth could well be around 10% this financial year. With favorable macro and micro growth drivers, the stage is set for India's investment cycle to kickstart and catalyze into recovery towards becoming the fastest growing economy in the world. Atmanirbhar Bharat mission encapsulates major structural reforms, will play a critical role in shaping India's economic growth, both through the signaling of business opportunities and expanding of spending channels, and of course, changing the mindset of all Indians. Reforms and easing of regulations, push for infrastructural investments, boost to manufacturing sector through production-linked incentives, schemes, pick up in credit to given adequate liquidity, and low interest rates will support the necessary aspects of growth. This will help to make India a USD 5 trillion economy, a dream which I think our Prime Minister has embedded in us, and every businessman, every Indian looks forward to achieving this goal. The availability of necessary skilled manpower is an important driver in this effort. Even before the pandemic, issues like constantly evolving technology advancements, lack of adequate skills, and new ways of working for disrupting the jobs and skilling ecosystem. There is a need to rethink how to prepare workforce for the future, from predicting the future skills required to keeping pace with a fast-paced technological climate. In short, becoming future-ready. The Indian economy has always had a very large informal component. Over the last few years, fueled by government initiatives, there has been a robust shift from an informal to a formal economy. The immediate benefit of such a shift is that plugs revenue leakages, amongst others. However, the long-term impact is far deeper. It induces a cultural change and makes sound governance practices a part of our DNA, thereby enabling us to create business models that can be scaled up for inclusive growth. This shift in the Indian economy from informal to formal presents a great platform for ISBA and ICC to partner with the UK to inculcate an ethos of good governance practices through more interactions, not just with large companies, but also with the MSMEs and informal sectors. As an advanced country and an established partner, the UK has considerable knowledge and experience in establishing and nurturing sound governance practices. The Indo-British Scholars Association, which seeks to promote enduring relationships between India and the UK, primarily through education, arts, and culture, and corporate connections, can also play a very vital role in this process. This is the first collaborative program between ICC and IBSA. Current president of IBSA, Mr. Rajiv Kaul, past president ICC, has a close connect with ICC, as do several other members and patrons of IBSA, such as Mr. Budia, past president, Mr. Sumit Mazumdar, Ms. Tara Pal Chaudhary, among others. We'd like to see more such collaboration programs between ICC and IBSA in future. With these few words, I once again welcome all our eminent guests and speakers and look forward to a fruitful deliberation and interaction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradeep, for your welcome. And thank you also for, in a way, setting a bit of the backdrop for today's webinar. And for me, of course, it's a pleasure to be back sort of on the Indian Chamber platform. I've got very fond memories, I think about 30 years ago, when I was the president at that point of time. And of course, I've had several interactions thereafter also with ICC, and it's been really enjoyable. So in a way, may I also now extend my personal welcome to all of you, following President ICC's welcome. And let me just give one line on IBSA. Indo-British Scholars Association, we were formed about 24 and a half years ago. In fact, little actually more than that. We were formed in January 1997, and we were inaugurated by John Major, who was in Calcutta then, and we were formed at the behest of the British Council. So in a way, we were under, and still are, we are deeply connected with the British Council and indeed most things British. But we have now really, in a way, come on our own financially and otherwise. We have a large number of members. Our membership actually spreads to many corners of the world, whether it's USA, whether it's UK. We have a couple of members in Europe as well. And of course, a bulk of them are in India. In addition, we were privileged the last few years to get a few sort of good corporates, including Tata Steel, ITC, Hindustan Unilevers, TIL, and Patent. And in a way, today is the first program where we have two CEOs and chairmen and chairpersons of companies who are our corporate members, amongst the first of our corporate members. So they are both very successful leaders. They are leaders who have contributed an enormous amount to nation building, both of them nation building and indeed society at large. And something that I think all of us value most about them is they are both leaders full of humility. So a special welcome once again to you, Sanjay Budia, and to you, Shumit Majumdar. I've been privileged and fortunate to have both of you as my dear friends. And for people who've just joined in, unfortunately, our third panelist and speaker, Nick Lowe, who's the Deputy High Commissioner for UK based in Kolkata, he is indisposed and therefore will not be able to join us, but he has sent his best wishes for a lively dialogue today, which we are hoping to do. You know, friends, I recall that when I was president of ICC 30 years ago, and thereafter, I think about 25 years ago as president of ICC, invariably when we were talking on topics such as today's, I used to say, and most of us used to say, that India is at the crossroads. Well, I'm very happy that today, India is no longer at the crossroads, and we have moved beyond, well beyond the crossroads in most areas. Although I think with due humility, we must say that there are still many areas where there's lots for India to progress in. But what lies ahead certainly are very exciting decades of our growth in all the verticals that makes a country prosperous, more equitable, and sort of moves us up in all the various indices which develop into a good and wholesome society. So I personally have a lot of hope, and I know that our two panelists have hopes also, although they are both realistic, they have hopes for the future. So may I now turn for the opening remarks to the younger panelists first. So Sanjay, the evergreen panelists, can I request you to come in first, and thereafter Shumit. Sanjay.
Thank you, Rajiv. Many thanks for the kind invitation to join this esteemed panel. And Rajiv is one person whom I can't say no. He is sort of my mentor. And people and panelists who are here, they are primarily from Kolkata, but some of the guests may be from London. So very good evening and good afternoon to you all. The subject chosen today could not have been better. India in perspective today and tomorrow. If you say India today, what is India? Basically, I feel it is the current flavor. The world is looking at India. India is the destination of choice. And if you are talking of reliable, robust, risk-free partner, people are coming to us. Let me give you a personal example. We are into exports and to developed countries. I'm not taking names. And where we used to go twice, thrice a year, now it is the other way around. We have proved our mettle. The world is looking at us. And it is a golden time that what Rajiv said, that it is the India of today. People are looking at us, and it is, there is energy bubbling all around. There is development on all fronts. And I think this is the time for us to capture and move forward how much we can do. When we talk of the government policies, the initiatives, interventions, we can see action happening all around, whether it is spending on infrastructure, national monetization plan, the healthcare schemes, reforms in labor laws, banking, digitization. There is action, and it is concrete action. As Rajiv earlier was mentioning, he had been the past president of CII, and I also play an important role there. I chair the exports committee. And 2 days back only, there was a National Council meeting of CII in Delhi, where there was a survey poll of the CEOs, and 2-3 questions which really came out was about the capacity utilization of the industry in general, and it was more than 90%. About the investment figures, about the employment, and everything was above 90%. So that only shows that the industry is geared up, there is demand, and people are looking at us. When we talk of India tomorrow, so let me only say this, that India of tomorrow is India of destination by choice and by compulsion. When you look China plus strategy or China alternate strategy, there is nobody else whom we can think of, and it is up to us how soon and how fast we can. I am little biased because the panelists, the speakers, they are all from Calcutta and from Bengal. So as they say, charity begins at home. Let me also talk about our state, the state of West Bengal or the West Bengal. The leading magazine, India Today, in its latest issue, has said that West Bengal is on number 1 in terms of improvement in governance among the best states. And some of you who may not be from Bengal, let us say the different initiatives taken by our government here in Bengal are really far-reaching. Our chief minister going to the districts every 10 days, she has visited all districts. I don't know how many times, and currently also she's on the district visit, the various schemes called Dware Sarkar, governance at your doorstep, and so many things which are endless. So the Bengal is also booming. That is very, very important, because when we are from Bengal and when we talk of Bengal, I say, no, things are happening in Bengal. You have to come, you have to see, and you have to really realize that what is happening here. And lastly, I would also like to say that we have Bengal Global Business Summit happening soon in April 20th or 21st. So some of our friends who are from UK, definitely, you must come and see for yourself. So this is what India is. You have to come and invest in India and see for yourself. And Rajiv, if I can also touch on the export front or the global trade, primarily India did not have even more than 0.5% in the global world trade. And today it has multiplied many, many times. We had an ambitious target of achieving 400 billion, and I'm really happy to say that we will be crossing that. So that itself shows that we can perform, and we have performed. Even during the worst of the last 2 years, the pandemic has not stopped our spirit, and we have really surpassed, and we are way above to achieve 1 trillion by 2025. So these are some initial comments I would like to make, and as and when you would order us to say something more, we are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. I now turn to our senior panelist, Mr. Sumit Majumdar. Sumit, can I request you for your introductory remarks before we get into a dialogue?
Certainly, Rajiv. First of all, I'm sorry to hear that our guest is not well today. I don't know what's happened to Mr. What's happened to him, but I hope it's nothing serious and he recovers fast. So I wish him all the best. And the second thing, I wanted to make an observation, and this is for Rajiv Singh of ICC. Your background in blue and white looks beautiful, and it really looks stunning. I just wish to, give this evening's flavor. There was an insignia of IPSA also that would have given a flavor of this evening. Anyway, that's just the thought that happened. The other thing that came to my mind was we were talking about past chairman of ICC, and I was mentioned as a past member of ICC. I'm one of those guys who didn't make it to become a president of ICC. And
you are half president.
I was half president, okay. Whatever you say.
Actually, more than half, Rajiv, if I may interrupt, because he was pitched away to be national president of CII.
Right.
So Indian Chamber lost him, but we still have him physically and emotionally with us. So I think from that point of view, thank you, Sumit, for your continued involvement and support to ICC. Absolutely. Over to you, Sumit.
In fact, Rajiv, I'd like to add to that. I was speaking to Rajiv Singh last week, and the kind of programs he's doing and the amount of involvement he's got the people involved with him now. is really commendable. He's really doing very innovative programs, and he's always doing something. And I really compliment him. He's really taken ICC to different heights. So
Absolutely.
congratulations, Rajiv.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I imagine everybody else who are members of ICC and present here would wholeheartedly agree with me. Anyway, let me get started. A very, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's really an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of this session. And I must thank Rajiv, who incidentally has been my guru for many years, for this opportunity to participate in this evening's discussions. So thank you, Rajiv. The very word perspective signifies a point of view, and I believe most of us share the point of view that the report card of India, by and large, scores high on most counts. And without getting into politics or periods, I'd like to say today, without a doubt, India is on the high table in the global arena. And this has really been a good achievement for India. Before I go further, I'd like to quote, if I am allowed to, Swami Vivekananda. He said, "We are the makers of our own fate. The wind is blowing, those vessels whose sails are unfurled catch it and go forward on their way. But those which have their sails furled do not catch the wind. Is that the fault of the wind? India now has its sails all unfurled and is going forward with speed and agility, navigating the wind and carving out a significantly enlarged global profile. I can assure you, even in a lot of my travels, prior to the pandemic, of course, I mean, there was a definite interest about India and what was happening in India. And people were curious what was happening in India. You know, as somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Sanjeev, the stage is all set to realize our vision of becoming a 10 trillion economy by 2030. There is, because of historical reasons, there is always a tendency to view India through twin lenses of admiration and skepticism, admiring this vast nation for its democratic values and cultural heritage, and expressing concerns about corruption and not so friendly business rules and slow pace of change. I'd just like to touch on this, the second 2 points, the corruption and not so friendly business and the slow pace of change. These three things have definitely undergone a metamorphosis change. Things have changed, admirably in the recent years. Corruption is down tremendously, and I'm sure a lot of people, everyone will agree with me. I'm not talking about the small corruption that may happen at the entry level to an office, but I'm talking about the corruption that India was used to has definitely changed. And not so friendly business rules have also changed and improved. India underwent this study on ease of doing business, where we were year in, year out, raising the bar. For some reason, I haven't seen any results on that, but I thought that was during Amitabh Kant's time. I thought that was a very good initiative that really helped us measure where we were and where we should be. The other thing that's really admirable is India's commitment to renewable energy through the ambitious renewable power capacity targets. We have played a lead role in the Paris Climate Agreement negotiations. And when I was president of CII, I was fortunate to attend many of these meetings. And I thought a lot was really achieved. And when the previous president, of USA came in and said, climate change is all rubbish. We need to stop this Paris thing. It was very disappointing, but I'm glad that we are back there again. Coming back to India, India has really changed. I'd like to give some very typical everyday life experiences. Most of us have people working in our houses who have either come from Bihar or Orissa traditionally. The people from Bihar would talk about, they had cell phones, but they would have to walk 10, 15 kilometers to go and get their cell phones charged. Today, there is a toilet and power in every home in Bihar. This is something that has been a great achievement. The focus has always been in urban India. But now the focus is also on rural India. There are roads being built in rural India. Then another example from Orissa. Typically, we've been used to the cooks from Orissa being very good. So I've got some of these guys working in our office from Orissa. So I asked them, hey, I need a cook. Can you have someone come from Orissa? They said, sir, the state has changed so much that the jobs are available in Orissa, and we don't come to Bengal anymore. There was a time where all the states would send their people to Bengal. That has changed. So what I'm trying to get at, it is not pockets of change, but it's really changing for all the states of India. So collectively, India is gaining from this. We've seen some very good labor reforms. We've seen things on ease of doing business. We've talked about that. The job situation has become a lot better because setting up industries become a lot better and friendlier. The hesitations to set up industry has been addressed. Today, it is much easier to set up a new company, and it is much easier to move your factory from one place to another if there are reasons which force you to do that. So it's totally a different world today. Of course, we've had 2 sessions of COVID, and COVID, I don't know, is here to stay. And how long will the new normal be? The new normal, I don't know. Now we've got a new one that has emerged, which has, of course, affected industry. It has affected supply chain very badly. It has become very difficult to do business. But within that, because of the resilience that the Indians have built over the years, I think overall India has done well, and from all measures and metrics, they are still doing well. The last point I'd like to make, besides what I've said, and before we get into a discussion, is that while we would like India to be an economic superpower, and we are working hard on making India an economic superpower, but we also must not forget that we want India to be a happy and a human nation. These are some points I had to make. And Rajiv, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Shumit, and also Sanjay. This session is really supposed to be an interactive one. And I think a few of us have had our say. But I noticed that, Shumit, in you, other than your other 2 presidentships, you're also, I think, president of Bengal Chamber. Bengal Club. You've been president of Bengal Club.
I finished with that.
Yeah, no. So, but we have the current president also, who's a sort of a brilliant chamber person, a brilliant chartered accountant. So, may I request Ambarish to kindly either ask a question or make a comment or both. So over to you, Ambarish.
He'll probably
Incidentally,
be-
I caught hold of him on the flight coming back from London. And I told Ambarish, this is something up your street. Since you are coming fresh from London, you must also join us. So he has thankfully joined us. So over to you, Ambarish.
Mr. Gaul, there are two factual errors. One is I'm not brilliant, and the second one is I'm not a chartered accountant. I'm an engineer. So thanks
My
for
apologies, Ambarish, but
no,
as chartered accountant and an engineer, I'm an engineer, and I value that equally. So thank you.
No, I didn't expect me to make any comments or observations here because I was here only to hear out Mr. Majumdar and Mr. Budhia. So I can fully understand their perspectives on the positives of the present Indian situation, and I feel they're also quite optimistic about the positives to continue. And so, not making a comment, but just want to ask them that if any analysis of any countries, the present and the future is being done, then there are 6 dimensions on which it is being done, which is called a methodology called PESTEL, which is politics, economics, social, technology, environmental, and legal. So leaving aside the P dimension first, politics, not getting into that at all, but going by the ESTL, economic, social, technology, environment, and legal, the 5 remaining dimensions. Is there any dimension on which they apprehend that India can go wrong? Because it seems from their words that they are doing very well economically, socially, technologically, and all other aspects. Is there any dimension on these 5 where you feel that India can go wrong and whatever they're seeing as positive is not a sustainable one?
So would Shumit or Sanjay, who would like to take a bash at it first?
I'll take a bash at it. First of all, Rajiv, you mentioned that he was a brilliant guy, which is obvious from all the paperwork he's got behind him. So that tells you what he does during his spare time. So at least he's well read if he's not brilliant. Anyway, what we are doing very well in India is 2 things: digitization and startups. These 2 things have tremendous opportunities, but they also have their issues where things can go wrong, as we have seen. But so far, what we see on startups, we are doing very well. And the story that comes to my mind is the Wow Momo. I mean, I met these guys when they were thinking of Wow Momo, and when they told me their plans, I was absolutely flabbergasted. But look at them today; they've been tremendously successful. But sometimes I wonder whether these startups have a very short shelf life. But if you look at Amazon, no, they don't have a short shelf life. So if you look at examples, it seems to be very sustainable. And I just hope that we do our startups well, because that's the direction things are going. And that's where really we can get growth. Thanks.
Thank you. What about you, Sanjay? Would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I have only one comment, that we can go wrong only if we don't act fast, because the speed has to be very, very rapid, and the world is looking at us where there is no tomorrow. So we have to act today, and it cannot be just incremental. It has to be multiplier. So there are opportunities galore, and we have to just do it. If we don't catch up, that would be the biggest mistake which India will make.
Thank you. Would either the president of the chamber, Pradeep, or for that matter, the director general, who has to deal with all these things on a day-to-day basis, like to make a comment? Either of you?
No, I agree with Sanjay. I think it's a great opportunity. We, unlike China, we at least have business laws in our country. All we need to do is make sure that our system becomes more robust and more active, and this will give a huge confidence. And that is why, we made our motto this year, governance for growth. We just want to talk about, the growth opportunities are there. is just that last mile connectivity to all the laws we have. We have the intention, we have the laws, we have the intent. We just need to have that last mile connectivity. And I think we are ready to not just take off, we're ready to probably reach the Mars also.
Thank you, Pradeep. May I request Usha, Professor Usha Menon, who sort of spends most of her time in London. She's involved in the medical area. What her sort of vision is, and how does she see India sitting in London?
Thank you, Rajiv. And it's been really good hearing this conversation. I, of course, have no connections, well, very little connections with commerce, being in the university. But I do want to just continue on that governance for growth and say we also need education for growth, because we have a very young population in India and they need to be ready to take on all these new jobs and these new roles and to take it forward. You might be aware, I'm sure you're all aware, that India has a new education policy, which was announced in 2020, last year in July. And it has got some really ambitious plans in it. A lot of it aligned to working with industry and trying to make the whole degree program much more flexible, and at the school level, trying right in the beginning to try and introduce by year 8 literacy and numeracy in the population, and then take vocational skills to school. And then in the higher education space, work with industry and make R&D and a much more important aspect of the education programs. So I was wondering if I could ask all of you who what is the kind of interaction that is happening between the academic institutions and industry with regards to making the degrees, the higher education degrees, fit for purpose. At UCL, we did have a couple of years ago, in fact, ICC as well as the British Chamber of Commerce, all of them, many people coming for an open meeting with the university to say how we should shape our degrees so that they are better fit for purpose. And I was wondering whether such interactions are continuing here with academic institutions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Usha. Who would like to pick on this first? Would it be Shumit, you, or Sanjay, you?
I would suggest Dr. Rajiv Singh.
Dr. Rajiv Singh. All right, Dr. Rajiv Singh, why don't you come in? You've been working a lot in this area and you've been championing the chamber in this area. So why don't you come in, please?
What we know for sure that there is a deep connect between academic institutions, industry, and Government of India is, or rather has been running very large, or I would say world's largest skilling program for last 7 years. And they have already skilled millions of people with industry linkages. There are tried and tested models like IMC, which works with, that is basically a joint committee between industry and the academic institutions. There are plenty of models. Like last week itself, I was in Ranchi. So Government of India has schemes like Atal Innovation. Government of India also has schemes like the Centers of Excellence. So the institutes, the colleges which have teams which are into R&D, they can access central funding. And these also have tie-ups with industry partners. Like last week, there is this Indian School of Mining, Dhanbad. So ICC signed one MOU with them. So this ISB, they have a cell for startups, and the cell has got a funding of 100 crores from Government of India. And during that MOU signing, they gave funding of 3.5 crores to 5 young boys. Now they are basically going to explore solutions for mining, which could be like if you go deep, your cell phones don't work. I mean, there is no network which really works in the mine. So startup will work with them. And these students are from IITs. So that way there are, I would say, thousands of stories where government, industry, academia, they are all partnering. Only one challenge what I find that academia still has restrictions or challenge of sticking to the curriculum, which is, let's say, approved by UGC or their own state boards. I think they have to come out of it. Maybe they need to have a hybrid model where they go with the state regulated guidelines, but they need to also enhance the industry linkages. And anything what they do, whether R&D or any kind of project, that should have industry relevance. So that is the only challenge I find, but otherwise the engagement has been growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. I must now especially welcome another friend from London, friend of and a partner of IBSA, which is the Bengal British Heritage Foundation. I think I've added an extra B, but Saurav Nyogi is there. He is the president, and we signed a MOU in the presence of both the British Council and the High Commission. So a warm welcome to you from Saurav. It's a very pleasant weather in Calcutta today, probably rather wet and dreary in London, I don't know. But we would certainly like you to, again, give us your thoughts as the Senior Vice President of IBM sitting in London and as the President of the BHS, of how you see India today and how you envisage it tomorrow.
Thank you, Rajiv. I wish I can say the same about the sort of London weather, but it's a typical London weather today. It's gray outside. So I'll not comment on the weather anymore because it will depress me further. But sort of, I think it's fascinating always to talk about India, and I'll give an outside-in view. I think as we see the sort of post-COVID economic recovery happen all over the world, I think one of the biggest things that COVID has done is shown two things. One is how quickly you can do a digital transformation. Okay, and you know, there's a McKinsey report, and I can share that later on, which shows that some of the programs which used to take sort of 300 to 400 days are being done in 20 to 30 days. Okay, so the pace of digital transformation has really been picked up, not only at the board level, but also at the execution level. Okay, because you can always do the thinking, but if you can do the execution at pace, that's a brilliant sign. So that's something I think everybody should be aware of. And I'll come back to why I think that is great for India. Second is, I think cost is going to be a major focus. Okay, with sort of every sort of economic recession cycle we see, cost becomes a major focus. And that's a brilliant opportunity, okay, coupled with sort of leveraging of digital, but also sort of leveraging of the services market. Now, I've been sort of in the services market for the last 15, 20 years. And this is where I think the opportunities will grow. Two key things why it is important for India is when it is digital transformation coming into place, the automation has to be led. And this is where I think India can play a massive role. I think there was some discussion when I joined in around the work being done in mines. I think that's a fascinating example around how to use IoT and sort of open it up. In my previous organization, we have done some work in sort of South Africa and Australia in the mining sector, actually how you can bring in IoT and bring in automation significantly to improve productivity. And that's something which is amazing. And you don't need to be in South Africa and Australia to do that. You can be doing that from India. Another quick example I'll tell you is, there's this very interesting oil company I work with. They found a lot of oil in sort of Western Africa. So the geologists thought that it will be an interesting idea to actually look at the Eastern Latin America, because they were supposedly the same part of one continent at one point of time. And bingo, what do you see? You actually find oil in sort of the eastern part of Latin America, okay? So I think the use of technology and innovation and some of these things like analysis of the geological studies, they don't need to happen always from site, but they can happen from other places. So I think there's a huge opportunity both in the sort of digital side, but also in the IoT side. We talk about Industry 4.0, which has truly arrived, okay? So how do you make the most from an Indian perspective is something that I'll absolutely look forward to, because I think that will be huge in the coming years.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Saurabh. We value your partnership and we look forward to your delegation coming over this winter and indeed playing cricket with you and have an enjoyable sort of day at Eden Gardens, hopefully. May I now request some of my seniors as also younger generation of IBSA to make a comment. So with either you, Ravi, or you, Amitava, or the co-chair of the Youth Council, Shinjoy, like to, or ask a question or make a comment? Go ahead, Amitava.
Ambarish mentioned a few points and then left. Now, no one is discussing the judiciary part, the judicial processes of the country. When it takes 15, 20 years, particularly in the lower courts, to decide on a case, what is being done to improve this? And is it important as far as the industry is concerned?
Yeah, true. Would either you, Shumit, or you, Sanjay Budia, like to sort of get on this, or would you like to pass on this and get anybody else?
I just like to say, yes, it is definitely important for industry. It is a matter that concerns industry and everybody, the judiciary system. And we hear about reforms, but we really don't see much of it. It's the attitude is, oh, it'll take 20 years, 30 years, why worry? It is a major problem, it is a major concern. How much is being corrected, I don't know. Maybe, some of your lawyer friends would be able to tell you, but I don't see, or I'm not aware of much happening.
Pradeep, do you see in your years as Vice President and Senior Vice President and now President of Indian Chamber any change taking in the place of judicial reforms and speed of legislation?
I would totally agree with Mr. Ghosh on this. And part of the governance for growth agenda is to take up this cause, start an initiative from the Indian Chamber. So the laws are in place. I think the laws are very much in place. It's just the process. I think we need to interact with the government and try and help them in speeding up the process. And I think what the point Mr. Ghosh has raised would be answered.
And Shinjoy, would you like to raise any question now to the panelists?
Yes, please. Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to raise a very important thing which I am facing right now. I am 27, and at least 60% of my classmates are not in town. And trust me, the best of the best from my school are either based in, say, Bangalore, Gurgaon, Mumbai, or somewhere in the US or the UK. So how can we stop this this thing of the best brains from our side of the world going away and then making, all the US tech companies have Indian CEOs? And another example is Saurabh Neogi, who is here, who's from here again. So all the best brains go away from here. So what is the vision? How can we reverse that?
Well, before I hand over to the panel on a lighter vein, listen, Shinjoy, it means there's less competition for people like me, so why don't you, allow me to enjoy that benefit? But that is in a lighter vein, not to be taken seriously. So over to you, Pradeep. I see you wish to make a point on this.
I said to add to the lighter vein, some people call it brain drain. I call it brain investment. So we produce some of the best brains around the world. We just need them back here to invest in our state. That's all. I think
I think what Shinjoy wants is how can we do that now, or how can we prevent it as also whatever has happened, how can we get them?
Shinjoy should encourage his friends to reinvest back in this state in whatever form they can by sharing their knowledge, by sharing the wealth they have earned there. I think we have exported brains for a long time to grow.
And Shinjoy, let me tell you, Indian Chamber will support you and your friends who want to come back. They'll help you, pilot and overcome any problems you may have vis-a-vis government or other areas. That commitment Sanjay Budhia is giving, Rajiv Singh is giving, Pradeep's giving, Sumit Majumdar and I are all giving that.
Yeah. Rajiv, I would like to say that, this is like half glass full or half empty. So the perception is a bigger problem because, some of the friends who say Sanjay is mentioning they are going or they have gone, but they also need to see the present reality that things are happening in the state and everything is just not, half empty. There are many, many positive sides. And during my tenure, Rajiv Singh will remember, I had coined a word, 3S, showcase the success stories. There are so many things happening, like when we talk of Bengal and Sanjay, I think particularly you are talking of our state. See, whether there was a policy regarding land or labor, still that perception continues that there is a problem of a labor. But there are many around the panel here who would never have lost 1 hour in a strike or lockout. Like in Pattern, we have 3,000 employees, but we never lost 1 hour in a strike or lockout. Same is in the tractors and Rajiv Kaul's organizations and even Excite. There are many imamis, but people don't talk much about that. We only talk about the negative side. And that perception lingers longer than reality. So all of us who are in the state, we need to change that. And it's a long, continuous process. So I'm very bullish on the state. And I would really urge all of us that, we stay here, we live here, we love the place, and there are so many good things which we need to talk about. So somehow that perception issue is a very, very bigger issue. And so apart from labor, there was another perception regarding land. I think the recent policy announcements on the land issues, there are industrial parks available. Even the Chief Minister herself is chairing the West Bengal Industrial Development Board. And things are, changing, and it is going on a faster pace. We need to communicate, and I think Pradeep and Rajiv Singh from the chamber need to continuously do that. We are all together, and this is a regular, ongoing mission. That's what I would like to urge to you and to your young friends.
Thank you, Sanjay. And
Thank you.
May I turn to my senior and our immediate past president of IPSA, Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee, I think, who's probably just come out of his surgery room because he was wearing his cap, which he's quite quickly taken off now, I think. So, Sandeep, would you like to make any comment or raise any point or question?
Yeah, I was going to ask all these leaders of industry in West Bengal and India a very small and humble question. And that is, what lessons has the pandemic taught you? What have you learned from the pandemic about how we need to modify our life in the future, or what we've done wrong? And I'm going to ask you a little bit about your perception about healthcare facilities in this state and country, because that's really what has saved a lot of people that have been saved. So what's your perception? What do you think that we could have done better in healthcare, which we haven't, and what are the lessons that you think we've learned as far as healthcare is concerned in this country and in this state?
So who would like to go first on this? Sumit, you, or Pradeep, you, or Sanjay, you?
I think Sumit should kick this off because Sumit has been chairing the healthcare committee and ethics committee for a long time.
Okay, so Sumit, go ahead.
Well, doctor, the first point I want to make, out of all the professions that we talk about, the engineers, the doctors, the maximum number of people who go abroad to study that come back to India, I believe, are the doctors. And we need to understand what brings them back there, back to India. Why not the others? Because every doctor I meet is, he studied abroad, worked abroad, and then he's come back. So we need to learn from the doctors. Regarding the other question, what is the pandemic taught us? The pandemic has taught us, no matter what the situation is, one has to survive. One has to find new ways of doing things. The new way of doing things today is definitely, a remote communication, right? Like we're doing right now. Gone are the days when you could really, sit amongst each other and talk. That's something new, and we've learned it's very much possible to do, and it's perhaps more economical. Lot more flights are avoided, so it's far more economical, and also, your safety, that is mixing in crowds and all those such requirements are not required. It's very difficult to hear a person wearing a mask and talking. So these are things that we've learned, that it's possible to have life or live life in a different way. The only question that I've had, that maybe I'd like to throw it back at the doctor. What about the poor children who grow up with children and who learn life from their friends when they're growing up? But today they're not able to do that. Aren't they missing something out there? Sandeep?
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain you're right there, Sumita, because I think we are depriving our children of a normal childhood, a normal sort of interaction to which they are subject to when they go to school. The problem is that one of the big worries, of course, is that the vaccines are not yet, majority of them are not yet licensed for use in the pediatric age group, because we don't know what problems they can cause and complications. And therefore, most of them are unvaccinated. And that's really been a problem. I think there's a huge psychological impact. I don't think it's only concerning children. Those of us that have elderly parents at home, they've been very severely impacted by being forced to stay at home. And there's a huge psychological issue. And we are seeing this even in patients who've been vaccinated, who are now going out and who come to see us, that all of them, or a large number of them, have a psychological issue because of the pandemic. And you can see that there's more than a physical problem with most people we see today, particularly those of us that deal with patients with brain issues. The physical part of the brain issue is overshadowed by the psychological effect of the pandemic. The other thing, of course, in healthcare that we see now increasingly is that people come very late because they've just been postponing their treatment, thinking, oh, let's wait another month, the pandemic will go away, then we'll go to the doctor. And so we see people that come in a far more advanced state than we saw maybe in the last even 15, 20 years. But one of the questions that I really was aiming at when I talked to captains of industry is regarding our investment in healthcare. Do you think we've done a good job in investment in healthcare as a state and as a nation, given that when we had the pandemic, we realized that there are a huge number of deficiencies. The other thing, of course, is that in this country, as you know, close to 70% of healthcare investment is in the private sector. And 30%, a little more, is in the government sector. But unfortunately, controls are 95% in the government sector and 5% in the private sector. And this does not apply to any single other specialty across the board in this country apart from healthcare. So this is what I was going to ask you, because, as I say, healthcare in this country has become an island of socialism in a sea of capitalism. And can we survive like that in the future? What does that mean for people in industry who are involved with private healthcare to a great extent.
Well, I don't know if President of Indian Chamber or Sanjay or Shumit would like to respond to that. And we are now at 7, so we would like to finish up in the next few minutes. So if someone could respond to this question, and then in case Ravi Prasad wants to raise a question, my senior, or Shubrata Paul, who will be the incoming president, wants to ask a question or make a comment, then we'll have these 2 last points after the response to Sandeep's question.
Rajiv, I would like to make 2 quick points to what Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee said, that what pandemic has taught you. So basically 2 things. One, on personal front, that you value what you have, your close friends and your family, which you have really realized in time of need that there are people whom we don't respect, and we have no time for them, but for everything else. But that has really taught us very well. I'm not talking individually. Whomsoever you talk amongst your friends and family, everybody has said that pandemic has brought the family closer. Professionally, as Sumit rightly said, it has taught us to be efficient. It has taught us to look things inwards, because half of our time was going in the flights and checking in and checking out. So you had more time at disposal. So people looked at the organizations more closely and more intensely. So that has made us really efficient. The second point, what Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee talked about, the investments in healthcare. I am happy to share that we come from small town or tier 2 or tier 3, if you call, that is a place called Tinsukia in Assam. And this is the place where me, family, Minu, they all grew up. And there only last month, we announced an investment of about 25 crores in healthcare. So we thought, this is the place we come from, and this is giving back to the society. So we will be we have a hospital there, but it will be a totally brand new multi-specialty hospital. And we are putting a modest investment of about 25 crores. It should be up and ready next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. And I think primary and secondary health is very, very important. And I think that's a great initiative that you're doing, and it's a role model for others to follow in the smaller towns. Shubrata, you wanted to come in, and Ravi.
Yeah, one quick comment is that we have 2 stalwarts from the manufacturing sector, both Sanjay Budhia and Mr. Shumit Majumdar. So I'd like the views that in the next 10 years, can the manufacturing, now Government of India has put in special incentive scheme for specific sectors. But taking all that into account, can we become in the next 10 years the supply chain to the world? Because both of you are in the manufacturing.
Yes, Sumit, you would like to take it, then I can add.
Yeah, I'll be happy to, Sanjay. Whatever you need, or place the order on me, I'll send it to you. I think India can definitely and will definitely be the source for the rest of the world for most products, because we have so many inherent advantages, and we will definitely be there. It's just that we've had various other reasons that have held us back, but most of them have now been addressed. And the one that has been addressed very well, and we didn't talk about, is Atmanirbhar.
Yeah.
There were a lot of industries that could have developed in India, but because of unfair practices by other countries and things like that, it has been difficult. Don't believe funds or anything will hold us back, or capability will hold us back. With a few programs like Atmanirbhar, self-reliance and things like that, we could definitely be the supplier to the world, Shubrata.
Thank you.
Thank
Sanjay,
you.
would you like to?
Yeah, I totally agree what Sumit has said, and with the schemes like Atmanirbhar, PLI scheme, and other multiple schemes like spending on infrastructure, 1.5 trillion, multimodal connectivity, things are in place, and this is the drive, which I believe exports as the engine of growth will play a major role, because when the world is looking at us, and as I said earlier and repeatedly, this is the right time to capture the greatest market share. And when we are manufacturing and exporting, that will have an all-round effect. We were the office to the world, and now it is the golden opportunity to be the manufacturing hub or factory to the world.
Thank you, Sanjay. Ravi, for the very last word or the last comment or question.
Okay, so I just wanted to take up a point which Ambrish had raised, that apart from the economy, there are various other pillars that one needs to look at, and one of them is social. And I'm afraid on the social front, we don't seem to be doing very well at all. The level of intolerance that has happened in this country over the last few months, at least, if not years, is something that is going to hold us back. So if people are not able to freely express their views, there cannot be a free flow of ideas and there cannot be discussion. So today we are in a situation where anybody who has to say anything, first of all, has to think twice before he says anything, because otherwise there'll be a ton of people jumping on him. And we have a situation of self-censorship in this country today. People are afraid to say what they think. So that, I believe, is something that is going to hold us back if we are not careful about that. Thanks.
Would you like to respond to this, either Shumit, Sanjay, or for that matter, President Pradeep?
Rajiv, I would wholeheartedly agree with him. And this is, the tolerance is an issue that has become a major problem for us. And, I don't see a solution, but it needs to be addressed without a doubt. And this is becoming a major concern. So I totally agree.
Sanjay?
I agree.
You agree, okay. Well, friends, thank you very much for your time and very lively interaction. And for the very, very last word, may I request Director General of Indian Chamber, Rajiv Singh, to kind of wrap up.
Thank you. I think we had truly engaging discussions today. I have heard all of you in various roles, different occasions, but I think today's discussions were quite unique, different, and very, very timely. At a time when world is looking at India, India is making very rapid growth, and things are turning to be positive. I think it's really amazing. At the end, I would like to thank, first of all, Mr. Rajiv Kaul, who is the president of IBSA, for moderating, anchoring, and also making this entire dialogue highly engaging. Thank you. I would also like to thank Mr. Sanjay Budhia, past president, ICC, for his valuable comments and insights. Let me also thank Mr. Sumit Majumdar for all his deliberations and sharing his useful insights, like what he feels about India going ahead and what are the challenges, and also thank him for his comments about ICC and us. At the end, let me also thank all the patrons, Vice President, all the members of IBSA, and all the guests and the participants who joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rajiv, for your partnership, and to President Pradeep Sureka and my friend for the hand of partnership that ICC has given us, and indeed to Saurav for joining us from London. Saurav, you're a dear partner. We value it, and like I said, we will try and invite as many as we can from our panel also to come and witness